All right, what is up, guys? It's Halsey Schider with the Helicopter Podcast, and I'm so excited. Today is recording day, which means that I am doing a marathon of recordings, and I couldn't be more excited and honored for my first recording today with Kimberly Hutchings. Kimberly, welcome to the Helicopter Podcast. I was trying to get with you at Verticon this year, and you were so popular. I just couldn't track you down. I almost got you at the Robinson event, but I couldn't quite get to you. Now, your husband on the other side, Andre, he was like the guy that I kept seeing the entire show. I would be like, here, and then there's Andre. And then I was here, and there's Andre. And in fact, it was Andre and some other guy that owns a small MRO up in New York. I felt like we were stalking each other. In fact, that guy in New York was in the same Airbnb complex as me. So I'd see him on the elevator and see him all over the show. Saw him at the Robinson event. So I'm so glad that we got to connect. And of course, to MHM Publishing, Vertical Magazine, thank you so much for making the show possible. I'm rocking my Heli Life gear as well. So thank you to our apparel partner at Heli Life. If you haven't checked out Heli Life, I highly recommend. Kimberly, welcome to the Helicopter Podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thanks.
Verticon was busy this year. You guys have a good year?
We did.
A good show, I should say.
Yeah, it was great. So as you said, I was all over the place. So
yeah, super busy. In fact, I was like, I saw Andre day one on landings, and I'm like, hey, let's get you on the podcast. I have an open slot, and he's like, oh no, you got to talk to my wife. She's the one who's actually interesting. So I thought that was pretty neat. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I'm very excited to learn more about you. Obviously, Volo Mission is a company name that I'm very familiar with. I feel like there's certain brands within our industry that are just well known, and they have great reputations. And Volo Mission, to me, is one of those companies. I can't tell you how many times in a week I hear Volo Mission, whether it's from a client, a friend. And the interesting part is it's always so positive, which is great because it's a small industry, and sometimes you can hear a company name and then you hear a story. And with you guys, it just doesn't seem to be that way. So you guys are clearly doing something right. So excited to dive into that. One thing, man, I'm looking at your CV here. So much to unpack and talk about. But let's start with this. I have just a super non-aviation question.
Sure.
I love that you put in here that you're a wife and a mom, because that's like a huge job.
Yeah.
Andre seems pretty easy, though, so hopefully he's not too hard to manage. My wife, on the other hand, she has her hands full with me, but the mom part. So I'm actually expecting my first child, despite my gray beard already. We have baby number one coming in like 8 weeks. So what are some tips and tricks being a professional, someone that's working and busy and doing a lot of things that I can do to keep the business going, but also be engaged with my little daughter?
Yeah, that's tough. As I'm sure you hear all the time, it's, trying to find that balance piece. So next weekend, we're actually going to my daughter's university graduation. So we've made it through the whole way, baby to college graduate. So
nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, just a lot of balancing, I should say.
Yeah, that's, I'm hoping, we do live a nice existence. My wife and I both work together for the same company. We work from home. So we're hoping that we can kind of tag team a little bit with the baby. I think obviously the mom is kind of the more important piece for the first little bit. So I'm hoping I can be a good support, but it's one of those things that I think about, right? It's just like, how do I be a good father, but also a good business owner? And, we have employees to worry about and think about. And so it's definitely like a new thing. So congratulations. Where is she graduating from and what did she study?
She's graduating from UT Austin
Nice.
as an environmental engineer. She secured her first engineering job. She moved to Colorado. So she's on her way. She's a junior engineer.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. I spent some years in Austin, Texas, and that's a great town, great college town,
Yeah.
beautiful campus, great football program as well. So I'm sure she had a good time. Well, speaking of education, something that jumps out at me right away is you have a lot of education. Seems like you have gone to a lot of different schools and schooling. You have a bachelor in psychology, a master's in aeronautical science, and also a master's in leadership and organization development. So obviously, very academic. You've gone through school. I kind of want to start with the psychology piece. So was that kind of your original thought? Like, hey, I want to be in that field? And then how did that transition to then going from psychology to aeronautical science at Embry-Riddle?
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway secret word. Listen up and remember this word because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's secret word is turbine. Visit contests.verticalhelicasts.com to enter the secret word.
So with psychology, I've always wanted to help people. And that's where I started. At the same time, I've always loved aviation, wanted to be a pilot from the time I was 5 years old and took my first airplane ride. Didn't know anything about combining the two. Was in my pretty much last semester there at university, went on a helicopter flight tour with my sister, loved it. And like I said, I went to USC, so downtown LA, and there was helicopters everywhere. I'd planned on going to get my PhD, but as I mentioned, I'm a mom, so I was thinking, oh, I need to work and help and whatever. So went the helicopter route, got my license over the summer, continued working. One of my flight instructors there was a fatal accident. And then another close friend, a year later, there was another fatal accident. That's what kind of drove me into that master's degree from Embry-Riddle. I wanted to go into that safety side of things. And I was looking to see how I could combine the psychology with the aviation, and that's what led me there. I went down the stereotypical route that I call, for safety management stuff, human factors. And then at the same time, we're growing or started Volo Mission and worked with a lot of pilots from around the world, commercial pilots, heard a lot of stories, and felt like there was a disconnect between the office and the field, or what I refer to as a disconnect between the office and the field, and was looking to work with leadership to expand on that. So
yeah, I mean, look, I want to dive a little bit deeper into that, but I want to start with the psychology side. So as a pilot, right, I feel like during training, there's a couple times where we hear about aeronautical decision making and human factors. What comes to mind immediately is the I'm safe checklist, obviously. And I think that there's actually, it's a silly little acronym, but I think that there's a lot of, truth within that. But I think that human factors is it's like maybe your instructor talks about it for like 30 seconds to a minute because, look, I'm not a psychologist, right? I can't dive too deep into explaining. And that's the funny thing about pilot in general, right? Is like, we're not really masters of anything. We know a little bit about weather. We know a little bit about rules and regulations. We know a little bit about aerodynamics, but we're not, most of us aren't physicists and aeronautical engineers or meteorologists. And in this case, psychologists with human factors. So how big of a role is the human factor in flying? I mean, what do we have to do as an industry to really put that at the forefront? Because to me, it's probably one of the most important things, but it's often just not really talked about.
So I could go on about that for a very long time. So
you should.
Yeah.
Go.
So to break it down, yes, psychology is instrumental. Human behavior is huge in aviation, in any high risk industry, especially, where there can be loss of life. And the fact that we don't focus enough on we focus on safety. We come up with a lot of rules, but and in an effort to try and not have accidents. But what we seem to miss is the actual psychology and the human behavior, and focusing more attention on that instead of focusing on creating a rule. There is that human factors element, that we look at, spatial disorientation and those sort of things that are very much human factors, your brain, your eyesight, that kind of stuff. But which is where I went into the second master's degree, and that's the behavior side of thing. We talk about aeronautical decision making, and then we try to fit it into these little like check boxes, the I'm safe, the come up with apps, and did you get enough sleep? Yes. Did you do this? Yeah, I'm fine. Are you stressed? No, not really. Check, check, check. I need to get on this flight. And then each day, right, it gets faster. Oh, yeah, I know. Yep. Check, green light. Okay, you can go. We're still not addressing human behavior. And human behavior is, a lot of that driving force. Like, I need to get the job done. My family relies on me having this job, all this kind of stuff. And so I'm going to check the boxes and say, I'm good to go, even if I may not be. And it's not necessarily always a conscious thing that somebody's doing, but it's where we don't spend enough time in aviation discussing behavior and personal development. And what I've been talking about for at least 8 or 9 years now is emotional intelligence. So
when you say there's a disconnect between office and field, I mean, is that kind of what you're talking about as well? Do you think that this has to start with the leadership of, say, an aviation organization to support a culture in which really promotes this idea of, not just doing your risk analysis to check the box, but to actually understand why stress can be a role and increase your accident rate in an aircraft, or why lack of sleep is important? Is that what you're talking about when you're talking about kind of the disconnect between office and field?
when I originally talked about the disconnect between the office and a field, and it's evolved, I should say. So that's where I was looking for what's going on, because we work in external load. So you're not pulling an aircraft out of a hangar and then pulling it right back in. You're usually going to remote locations for extended periods of time. And it could be even in other countries where this stuff is happening. The decision makers are in the office somewhere way far away from what's going on in the field. There's different pressures, obviously, in the office. A lot of it has to do with financial pressures and, management things that are going on and that sort of thing. So some of the decision makers are forgetting what's happening in the field and what those people are experiencing or going through. So if they ask for certain things or they need certain things, it's kind of like, you'll work it out, you'll figure it out. And that includes even personality differences that are happening in the field. There can be conflict going on in the field. If it's out of sight, out of mind, how are we making sure that we're addressing that? So at first, that's where I was, just a disconnect between the office and the field as far as decisions, and then what the field was experiencing. But then as this has evolved, and as I've gotten more into emotional intelligence and leadership development and personal development, there's a lot of skill sets that if you look at, usually the way that aviation has happened, at least in the past, is we have somebody that's a pilot or a maintainer, mechanic, that does their job for several years, does it really well, and then they get promoted. And then they continue to get promoted into, anywhere from chief pilot to director of ops on their way up. in the meantime, are those individuals who started off as a pilot, being a phenomenal pilot, are they getting the same skills and training as a leader? Can they manage conflict? Can they, help people in stressful situations? All this kind of stuff. Are they looking out for those kinds of things? Different personalities. A lot of times, I hear from, the pilots that even come out to Volo Mission, oh, I'll give them a little class on emotional intelligence, just a quick hour, and they say, thank you for that. I wasn't aware. And then the next thing out of their mouth is, I wish my boss could hear this. So they need this course, or, stuff.
Hey, producer Zach, don't get any ideas over here, pal. Okay. I bet producer Zach is jumping up and down like, hey, give us the class right now. It's really interesting that you say that, though, Kimberly, because I've said that for a long time too, that one of the issues I think with the industry, and it's good and bad, is bringing up within. And I've always had an issue. I haven't brought it up from the emotional intelligence side, so I do want to talk about that. My side is always like the professionalism side. One thing that I struggle with in my business is connecting. I often have questions. I might right now, for example, that's a bad example. I'm not going to do that one. But I have, let's say in the past, an example where I have aircraft that I'm selling that need certain work done, but I can't really get a call back or a response back from the DOM or the chief pilot, or, because they're so busy doing like maintenance and actually touching the helicopter. And it's like this weird disconnect of like, okay, the businesses keep them doing like, shop work, whether it's a mechanic or flying from a chief pilot perspective. I see that all the time. Like, how do you have a chief pilot that flies 8 hours a day, right? How can he do anything else? So I see it from like a professional standpoint. I don't get emails always back in time. I don't get my phone calls returned. Whereas like me, I sit behind a desk. It's easy for me to be fairly communicative. I can just reach back out. It's quickly. So I see that a lot. But it's interesting. I guess I haven't thought about it from this idea of like, yeah, they're not really trained leaders. They're trained pilots. And then leadership on top of that is so difficult. So when you talk about emotional intelligence, I think of things like, if I'm being emotionally intelligent, it's saying sorry when I know maybe I did something wrong, or even sometimes when I feel like I still did something that I was right. I don't know. Like, that's what I think of emotional intelligence and being a good communicator. But how does it work for you? And what are some of the highlights and the key points of that class that you teach to pilots and leaders?
Verticon was epic. More than 600 companies, 15,000 attendees, and the cutting edge of vertical aviation technology. Next stop, Atlanta. Lottery 1 deadline is June 13th, and the show floor is filling fast. Secure your spot now at the world's largest vertical aviation show, Verticon, powered by VAI at verticon.org.
Yeah, so I do give a little some presentations and courses and training on emotional intelligence and leadership skills. So a lot of times, that's the thing. There's very limited knowledge on emotional intelligence, and there's different components of it. So, and there's different models. The particular model that I reference a lot in the training that I give is there's different categories. So, like how you see yourself. Do you have some self-confidence? Are you overconfident or underconfident? Do you continue to have self-development? And it could be anything. It's starting a new hobby. It doesn't even have to be, some sort of education piece of it. Then there's how others see you. How are you coming across to other people? Are you, closed off? Are you assertive? Are you overly assertive, not assertive enough? So we talk about that skill set. And in that too, ties in with empathy. And that comes into your interpersonal relationships. Do you have good interpersonal relationships? Do you work well with your coworkers? Do you have strong relations with them as far as friendships? Or do you come into work and just kind of go on about your business and don't really interact? Then there's the decision-making side of things are the impulsivity, the flexibility, those sort of things. How impulsive are you? You combine, for example, if you combine somebody that's impulsive with a high level of assertiveness and maybe a lower level of self-awareness, you can see what kind of person that is already instantly as soon as I say that. So and then there's stress management. So all of those, and there's different components of that, it branches off even further. So you work on developing all of those skills. Obviously, effective communication and listening. Listening is huge. We talk a lot about that, and how to continue to develop those and balance those.
Yeah, I mean, it's so dynamic. Being a leader is very challenging. I've been fortunate to now have my business for about 6 years and have wonderful people that work for me. But one of my daily struggles is becoming my best self, right? The person I was, say, 6 years ago was different than 5 years ago, different than 4 years ago, different from 3 years ago. But I'm constantly still trying to become this best individual that I can be, right? From a standpoint of understanding, like, I'm impulsive. When you say the word impulsive, I'm like, yeah, that's me, right? Like, so I have to do things. I have to actually I call them like speed bumps, mental speed bumps. So like if I'm about to do something that I know is slightly impulsive, I completely stop that and I set a time. Sometimes it's 15 minutes. Hey, don't make that call for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, don't make that call for 24 hours. And then maybe talk to Zach. Zach, who's a producer here, is kind of like my mental soothsayer. Like he helps me sometimes with my thoughts. And so, sometimes it's going to him and say, hey, am I reading the situation right? Or is this an impulsive thought? And so that's something that's been challenging. And then I have so much passion for my business. It's like, I'm a guy that could work, all day long and all evening, right? And that's why I asked some parental tips in the beginning. And sometimes maybe I have a false expectation of what the guys should be doing too, right? And so that's just all this learning. And so this is really fascinating to me. And in fact, I look forward to connecting with you more because it seems like this is some really cool aspects. How is the aviation community, specifically leadership within aviation companies, taken to this idea of becoming better leaders? Are they open to this feedback? Because I also know in aviation, including myself, there's an ego element. And sometimes that's like the biggest issue with emotional intelligence is this protection of your ego. And I know it can be rampant within helicopters specifically. So has there been a lot of hurdles, or are people pretty open to this type of talk?
So it's evolved. But yeah, in the beginning, like I said, I've been giving this either doing presentations at safety summits or, the expos or in companies for a little over 8 years now. And in the beginning, I would say, hey, I'm going to, this is my presentation. It's on emotional intelligence. And some of the feedback I got was, do you have to call it that? And I said, yes, because that's what it is. So I would go into, a presentation room and I wasn't sure how it would be received. And even the people hosting the events or whatever, they weren't quite sure either. And the rooms ended up always being full, which started telling me and also the ones hosting the events that this was something that people were curious about, if nothing else. Because I would refer to it as emotional intelligence, the missing piece of the safety puzzle. And so there's a lot of discussion. They listen, they hear it, but that urge to that ego part of it, like, I don't want to give in to this, even though I hear what you're saying, I agree to it to a certain point, but we still need to stick with safety. And they just go right back to what's known, the key words in safety, and that sort of thing. And even now I'm trying to shift away from stop saying so much our safety culture and say our company culture, our entire culture, our aviation culture, and stop isolating the word safety. Because if your company culture is not positive and effective, then how the heck would you even think that you could have a safety culture that was actually truly safe? So stop saying safety culture. Just say our company culture and work on the company as a whole. So that's where I'm trying to change that language now.
Yeah, I think it's a huge mindset. It's also confusing to me though, because I've been in scenarios, I've been lucky to be a part of companies that, in my opinion, have superior culture. And I felt very enabled and safe. Not safe in the way of being a safe pilot, but just safe being at that company. I could call my I'm gonna give them a shout out, Air Evac Life Team. That was a company that I felt so enabled to make good decisions. My direct manager at that company was someone I could call and tell him anything, and he would support me. And not like blind support, right? If there had to be some type of consequence to an action, I never had a position where I was calling him to be like, "Hey, I over torqued or this or that." That luckily didn't happen, but I just always felt very empowered, and that made me want to be a good employee. And their safety record really dramatically has been so much better. And that's culture, that's training, inadvertent IMC training specifically, in my opinion. But it was such a great culture to be a part of, and I think accidents have highly decreased with them because of that. But I've also worked at companies where for 2 years I was in fear of losing my job for the slightest little human mistake, whether I was hovering too high or not doing this or doing that. And it was almost like they led from this fear point. And I have to say that company had a great safety record on top of great maintenance and things like that. But I'm curious to hear, like, there has to be kind of a middle ground, right? Where, you can be an effective leader, but you don't have to necessarily do it from this fear aspect.
Yeah, and that's it, right? So speaking about your first company, the company that you just spoke about, was that whole organizational culture. You felt safe, you felt empowered. That's the point. And that should translate to a very successful, positive safety culture, because you don't feel the repercussion. You feel like you can be honest. You don't have to hide. You're not in fear of losing your job every day. So you can speak up, and that sort of thing. So that supports a very positive safety culture, because the overall culture provides that to everyone. So, and then referring back to the second one that you spoke about, you said it. It's, yes, they had safety. They had, limited accidents or incidents, but it came from a place of fear. To me, that is not a positive safety culture. That is you afraid so much so to break any rule that they enforce, that you're going to lose your job. That's not a positive safety culture. They've created, I guess, in a place where, there's decreased accidents or incidents. But when we say safety culture, it's supposed to be that's the epitome of it, right? When they say safety or just culture, that you should be able to go to your leadership and say, this happened, or I'm worried about that, or I don't feel like I have the ability to perform this job because, it kind of outseeds my skill set right now where I'm at, or whatever. But instead, you're so afraid of making a mistake that's how they're limiting things from happening. To me, is that a good safety culture? Absolutely not. That's just ruling by fear. It's just a good safety record. It's not a good
Yeah, it's a good,
culture.
It's not the same. And honestly, it's not great for retention, right? Maybe company A has better retention than company B in this example.
Yeah.
I certainly probably would have kept working at certain places longer if if I didn't have that fear, right?
Mhm.
But it made me like, oh, I don't want to be here anymore, right? So it's interesting. And I much preferred, the approach of Air Evac. Again, I'll call them out. They did a fantastic job, in my opinion. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. I've been able to talk to a lot of people, and I think it's not just AEL. I think it's air medical in general has really turned the tune on, not just talking about culture, but actually implementing it and living it and breathing it. I think it's so important. And I think we see that in non-aviation jobs too, right? I've seen my wife work at places that she loves,
Mhm.
and then at other places that she's miserable. And it's all because everyone else is either miserable or happy,
Right.
and because of the company culture. So it's all very interesting stuff. I want to talk about Volo. I promise we're going to get there, but I am just a little bit curious of this idea of stress. I'm an open book, and that's why I think the podcast has done well. I have no problem sharing myself in some of the struggles that I have. Stress to me is a big issue that I have. In fact, recently I went to the doctor and I got some blood work done. I live a healthy lifestyle. I exercise. I try to eat well. I ski a ton. I'm outdoors a ton. Lots of vitamin D here in Central Oregon. My blood work comes back. It's not great. Metabolic health for me right at this current moment is not superior. And the doctor's, scratching her head. I have strong blood in the family. She's like, I can only think that it's stress. Are
Mhm.
you stressed? And I'm like, of course I'm stressed, right? I have 2 businesses, I have this, I have that. I'm so stressed. And she's like, oh, well, you just got to figure out ways to manage it. I'm like, well, I ski, I exercise, I eat okay. I feel like I'm doing everything, but yet here I am not compromised. I'm still compromised with stress. Honestly, as we sit here today, I'm compromised by stress. What are some of the techniques that you share with pilots, with operators, with owners, other leaders, to help them kind of manage this stress? Because stress, in my opinion, is so physical. I mean, it can literally kill you. I
Yeah.
think it's the reason why I'm 36 and I'm already fairly gray.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
I mean, that is tough, because some of all the things that you listed are things that, are mentioned for helping mitigate and deal with stress, which is, the exercise and the eating healthy. But then, there's always that mental side too. You can go out there. Some days you're really stressed, and the best feeling for you is to go burn it. Just burn it out of you. I'll hop on the Peloton and pedal away, as long and hard as I can. But there's other times, especially when it's collecting over periods of time, and it's not just a stressful day or a stressful week where you can kind of get out there and burn that stress off. It's where days turn to weeks, turn to months, and it's like, man, this, there's a lot going on. I'm juggling a lot. And that's honestly where there's a couple things. One is you do have to start looking to see, how long can I sustain this? Is this too much on my plate? Is there something I can get rid of? Is something going to, if you have deadlines, will that be over soon? And then that will relieve some of that. If not, you need to start thinking about ways of doing that. And then the other thing, which is something else that I speak about, is the mindfulness piece of it. And that's just focusing on the here and now when you're doing something, and being present, instead of constantly thinking, what do I have to do next? What am I doing over here? You're driving down the freeway. You don't know how you got home because you're thinking of the 5,000 things that you need to do. It's giving your brain a break So
Yeah, that's the part where I'm having an issue right now. And memory is one of them, right? I'll be like, oh my God, am I losing my mind? Because I can't remember things, like my short-term memory. And I think it's all because, my brain is constantly going. And honestly, I feel pretty good. I think things for the most part feel pretty good right now. Business is very complicated and hard. And so
mhm.
that's always going to be a driving stress. I think also we're so, man, I wake up, I'm trying to be better, right? Like I wake up in the morning and I'm hit with my phone, and it's like the first thing I go to sleep and I'm looking at my emails, and I wake up. The first thing I do is check my email. I've been instituting a daily cold plunge and a sauna for a year, and I love doing it. But now I'm catching myself on LinkedIn or messaging, or scheduling my day in the sauna, and I'm like, God, give yourself a break, dude. So I think that's kind of my issue is I'm just like, I almost feel like I can't stop. And so this is not a psychology. I'm not paying you for that. So I won't talk more about me, but it's just interesting. Stress is, to me, is so critical. I feel like overall I'm a pretty level-headed guy. And so for me to feel this type of stress is kind of wild. And obviously with a kid on the way, I think it amplifies. It's always a little bit louder when there's kind of something on the horizon. But very interesting. And to our listeners, as we kind of move away from the psychology piece and the human factors piece, I think honestly, Kimberly, we could sit here and talk for hours about
Yeah.
this. And I think it's maybe something we should continue to do in the future, is a little human factors piece. I know that you write for MHM already, and we're also part of the MHM family. So this could be a fun way to stay connected and keep driving what you're talking about, because I think it's really important. I think that for a long time, aviation was put your feelings away, kind of shut up and color, don't ask, don't tell type of situation. And I think that's been toxic for the industry. I think it leads to high alcoholism rates. It did for me. Drinking was an outlet for me for many years, and now I don't drink because of that. I think that it causes obesity. And, you look at some of these commercial airline pilots, they're big guys, right? It's like, of course they're big. They live in hotels, they're stressed, and they can't talk to anyone about it, right? God forbid you have a little depression or anxiety here or there, or just be human.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to the podcast today, just think about yourself. You have to prioritize your mental health, your physical health. Physical health is so important, right? Exercising and getting out there. A lot of utility helicopter pilots, a lot of people that Kimberly probably works with at Volo Mission, they're living on the road for probably 6 to 8 months a year, doing incredible flying, doing amazing things to save lives and to put out fires and to help our economy run. And they're probably living in a hotel eating McDonald's every other day. Right. So you got to physically take care of yourself, both physically and mentally. And so Kimberly, maybe if you would be open, we can continue conversations in the future. But, we're coming up on 40 minutes almost. So I do want to get into Volo Mission. Again, it's a company that I'm not super familiar with. I always kind of joke that early on, I kind of made a decision to go what I call the white collar flying route, which is like, be a CFI, go fly tours, go to air medical. Like that was just the path that I thought might be more cohesive for the person I am.
Mhm.
Whereas you can have a path where I think you go more utility, right? It's like the more fun flying, you're doing amazing things. It's total stick and rudder. It's like real helicopter flying. When I think of helicopter flying, I think of that. I flew with a buddy the other day that was a huge utility pilot forever. I'm like, dude, you are so much better at flying than I am. It's disgusting. It's like, I hate you. And, there's that route. So I didn't go that route. It's an unfamiliar route. I've been so lucky to have some awesome people on the podcast that are doing, 15,000 foot density altitude, external load in the Swiss Alps, to folks here that are stringing lines all across the United States and doing amazing utility efforts. So Volo Mission, it says right here, I'm looking at the website, is the world's leading training, consulting, and advising company providing comprehensive services and support to meet the critical demands of the external load and aerial firefighting industry. So let's break that down. Tell me about Volo Mission. It was born, I think, in 2014. How was it born? How did this brainchild come about? And how have you guys assisted in growing the industry?
So the way that it came about is from Andre, my husband, who is a external load longline pilot. Worked for Columbia Helicopters for 27 years, doing just about everything: logging, firefighting, construction, all of it. So back when he was brought up, it was, here's a helicopter, here's a long line, more or less go figure it out. And then also during the upgrade, from SIC to PIC, it was kind of like, hurry up, learn how to do this because I need to move on, so there wasn't much in the way of formalized training. So he had wanted to create a long line course. So with his experience and then combining it with mine on the emotional intelligence and the psychology and the human factor side, we have really created a company that we're proud of. We focus on the individual and not just giving them the long line training, but also that emotional intelligence leadership side of things as well. And just go from there. So
Yeah, I mean, I've heard very wonderful things about it. Columbia Helicopters actually is a big reason I got into helicopters. I grew up just outside of Aurora, where Columbia is based, and specifically every year I go to a pumpkin patch right near there, and I would see the big helicopters. And as a little kid, I'm like, oh, that's something, right? And so I've always thought that Columbia kind of helped me make my decision to get into helicopter aviation. Did you guys live in Oregon?
no, we're in Texas, outside of Dallas.
But did when he was at Columbia, would he commute then?
Yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that utility life! I'm telling you, that's what I'm talking about. So what can someone expect? I mean, Volo Mission, I'm guessing, is tailored for all levels, right? From maybe never long line before to guys and gals that have been long lining, not only stuff and things, but also maybe even humans, for years and years and years, and are extremely proficient.
Yeah. So we started off with a comprehensive course, and that was, no experience whatsoever. There was always that conundrum. I want to be a long line pilot. You need long line time. How do I get long line time? You need to be a long line pilot to build time. So people started coming to us that didn't have any time at all. And we would get them to what we refer to as a commercial standard, so they can put, set an AC unit on bolts and that sort of thing. And then that branched from there to, we do recurrent training. We have someone right now, as a matter of fact, doing recurrent training. So they've been long lining for a while. They just need to sharpen up their skills. Long line skills can deteriorate pretty quickly if you're not using them, especially if you've had a couple year break. So they'll come in and freshen up their skills. We focus on construction stuff, so more precision type work. You might have been doing aerial firefighting with a bucket, and now you want to move into more precision type work. So we have a small course for that. We have aerial firefighting course. So we just branch them off to specialize in certain sectors of the industry.
Walk me through, like, let's say I showed up next week and here I am. I'm a commercial trained pilot. I got 1,000 hours, and I'm really excited to get in utility. I've even done some ground operations for utility operator, but they really want me to go and get the experience before they're willing to put me in their, say, 407 to go in long line. What does that course look like for me at that stage? How many hours is it typically? How much of the course is ground? And what is the platform? Talk to me, I guess, more about the R66, I think, that you guys are using.
Yeah, so we start off using the R44. So if you back up, so if you come to us, you want to enroll, get your training, we have 18 hours. That starts from zero. You'll start off learning vertical reference, which is the key to long lining. So you start off learning vertical reference. We take you through different lengths of line, anywhere from 50 to 200 feet. You work with those different things. We work with multiple different types of loads, 2-part loads, wheeled loads, all kinds of stuff, loads that roll, everything, so that you get all kinds of experience. And usually our course consists of 2 pilots at a time. So that way one person's flying, the other person is kind of resting or observing from the ground. They will help ground crew a bit. You can learn a lot of information watching from the ground. So it's beneficial to do that. They don't work ground the whole entire time because there are rest times. So then they just swap back and forth. Part of my thing is I require a lunch. I enacted that years ago. That was a battle I fought with Andre because he's old school. And utility pilots, long line, they work. So they get a lunch.
No soup for you.
Yeah. If it were up to him, there would be no soup for anyone. But, now he's changed quite a bit. He's had to listen to me long and hard for many years talk about that side of
Well,
things.
like I said at the top of the show, right? You're a wife. That's a job in itself, right? So I get it.
Yeah. So they have lunch, they come back, they finish the rest of the day, and then we have on-site accommodation. It helps again with that fatigue factor. It's an actual 4-bedroom home, fully stocked kitchen, everything. So again, we talk about utility or long-line pilots living on the road. They don't have to stay in a hotel. They have, all the service, washer and dryer. They cook meals. They are able to eat healthy. They go back there, like I said, for lunch. They're not having to drive, 30 minutes into the airport or to our ranch from a hotel. So that's saving on sleep time. I mean, we try to really think about everything. They walk across the street to get their breaks at lunch, and then they're back again. It's just, we really try to, it's not just about training. The training is extremely difficult. It's challenging. It's meant to be that. We're a commercial standard level, so it's tough. They're tired. Everyone gets cranky at times because, it's a lot of work. But the experience is that they do feel welcome. They feel appreciated. They feel like we're there to serve them and give them the best training possible.
One of the negative learning tendencies I have, I'm really calling myself out this show. I promise I have good qualities too, but a negative learning tendency that I have, which I saw when I was learning how to do some external load. So I did go when I was going to Hillsboro back in the day, and I was the chief instructor there. They're like, as a benefit to my big salary there at the time, they were like, hey, we'll train you to go how long line, then you could teach people. And so I did like the training. At that time, it was a guy named Marcus that was doing it. He came from the industry, so he's a great guy. But by that time, I don't know, I had a couple thousand hours probably of flight time. I felt like a pretty competent, comfortable pilot doing full downs every day, kind of top of my game in that world. And then I'm doing long line, and I feel like I'm completely just exposed and fish out of water. And this happens to me sometimes that like I sometimes allow my frustration to be so prevalent that I just turn off my learning part of the brain. And I have to like recognize that and step away and then come back. Yeah. Sometimes I have to step away for a whole day, and then I come back and I'm like, okay, I've slept on it. I've kind of been able to visualize it, and now I think I can do it. How do you guys mitigate that? I mean, I know you talk a lot about human factors and things, but is that something that's common? Because I just think that it might be a common trait with, higher ego helicopter guys and gals.
This podcast is brought to you by HeliCASTS. Tired of listings that go nowhere? Exhausted by tire kickers who waste your time? Don't sell your helicopter alone. HeliCASTS handles the entire process from start to finish. So, if your helicopter is sat too long waiting for a buyer, contact the team at HeliCASTS today for your complimentary market valuation. Call 1-855-HeliCASTS, 1-855-735-5226, or email sales@helicopter.com. HeliCASTS. List it, Sell it. Done.
It is extremely common, and when we have a course 2 to 3 people, it's almost guaranteed that one of them will be like that. And that's where there's some discrepancy. There's some discussion too, and some of the things that I mentioned is that, and I've seen it time and time again. And Andre, and that, you can have a lower time pilot. Some pilots come to us for different reasons, whether it's even just building their skill set. They'll have 500 or 600 hours, and they'll be on the same exact course with someone has 7,000 hours. And a lot of the times, more often than not, the person with the less amount of hours does almost exceptionally better than the person with more hours.
Which doesn't help the situation.
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't help the mental situation there.
No. So sometimes, honestly, it does come down to talks with people, like where Andre will start to have a talk with them and see if we can get past it. Then I come in and try to have a talk with them and do some more of the coaching side of things. And they get very much in their head. They get very frustrated. They can't figure it, and they're not listening. So there's the ego side where they don't want to listen. And then there's the perfectionist side where I want to do this and I'm mad at myself for not being able to. And you kind of have to decipher which one's going on.
Yeah, no, it's so again, the human brain is very complicated because, for me, it almost turns into like this defense mechanism where I'm like, I even get defensive maybe, and I'm like trying to further protect myself with get me out of here because I don't want to be in this situation. I haven't had that feeling in a helicopter for a long time. I had it kiteboarding last year. I've been kiteboarding for a few years. I'm like intermediate beginner, so like I can get around. I enjoy it. I love doing it. And I took a kite lesson just to kind of refine some of my skills. And it was just it was a kite mare of a lesson. It was just horrible. And it was horrible because I was horrible. I was not like a great student. I was just getting overly frustrated, complete waste of money because I just completely shut down. And so, I've often told students that in the past when teaching, like, hey, look, I think you're being too hard on yourself. And so it's like, I had to recognize that, be like, man, I've seen this on the other side. So I know a lot of our listeners are learning how to fly right now, maybe not even with external load, but with learning how to fly, there's so many complexities, right? You're getting decent at auto rotation, slope landings, normal approaches. I think normal approaches are the hardest thing that we do in a helicopter. Or a steep approach, right? Like you're always learning, you're always screwing things up. You're not great. You're not supposed to be because you're learning. So be easy on yourself. And if you start to feel like you're disconnecting to kind of preserve your ego, step back, call the lesson off, take a deep breath. I always find that I do better the next day, right? Like the first time I fly a new helicopter, I'm like fish out of water. I'm like, oh, I don't know where to look and I don't know where to put my hands. And this all feels weird. And then I go home, I sleep on it, I come back the next day and I'm like, oh yeah, this is a helicopter, I can fly it. And it just, I don't know, it's really been helpful for me. Well, as we get close to time here, I want to talk about some of the things that I've seen recently on LinkedIn. I think it was, it's in front of me, but my iPad's off. Ladies of the Line, am I saying that right?
Ladies of Long Line.
Ladies of Long Line, okay. Not the Ladies of Line. Yeah, okay. Now it's there. So tell me about that. Obviously, you were the president at one time for Whirly Girls. Mm-hmm. So obviously, you're very connected with the female side of the industry. What is that program about with Ladies of Long Line?
So I guess it stemmed a couple years ago. Back in 2021, I had watched Andre, teach people to long line for years and years. And also all the years that I've heard, oh, it's a tough industry. It's this, it's that, and whatever. So pretty much it was more of a male industry, even more so than just helicopters or aviation in general. So anyways, we had a Whirly Girl Scholarship winner come out In 2021, I hopped in the helicopter and started doing some long line training with her, back and forth with her, because I thought, this would be a good opportunity. And then just like when you get in a helicopter, you find yourself hooked, and I was hooked instantly. I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't, I have to do this. So
I've been sending too many emails. Get me in the cockpit.
yeah, so it was great. And I thought there's absolutely zero reason why more women should not be doing this. And I use the term fun extremely loosely. It's the fun of the challenge of trying to do it, and then being able to do it, to place a load, to move something. That's, again, what I use the term fun loosely. And so there's absolutely no reason why more women shouldn't be involved. So between, again, supporting the industry in all aspects, so getting more women involved, helping more operators you just opened it up to a whole new, you start getting more women involved, and now all of a sudden you don't have one applicant, you might have, more than that applying for a job, because there's more women applying for jobs, looking at external load stuff instead of thinking, I'm not going to bother applying for those kind of jobs. So,
well, I think that's the magic of some of where we're at in our, not just at this time in the world, but also some of the positives to social media, right? There's some negatives to it, lots of negatives actually, but some of the positives is a guy like me can start a podcast and have amazing conversations with people like you that, you represent females being empowered within the industry, and it's a very male-dominated place, right? And so I think by being able to have more people like you that are advocating for women to get involved, I think it just paints that path a little bit clearer, which I think is really neat. And not just for women. I think that this podcast, and I think other podcasts, I think other positive social media influencers. I think of, Lee Coates, right? She's like a total badass in my opinion, and is really, I think, probably a figure that helps more young girls get involved in aviation. So I think it's really cool. If our listeners are of female kind, how can they get involved with, say, Whirly Girls? What is that about? Is it, why is that important for them to get involved? What would be your pitch on that?
So all they have to do is go to the website and become a member there. If you're not a helicopter pilot, then you can become an associate member. Otherwise, you can become a full member, and it's the members and associate members now have access to nearly $600,000 worth of scholarships, which is the big thing. Yeah, and it's growing every year.
I had no idea it was that much.
Yeah, it's huge. So, and a lot of, again, not just pilots, there's a lot of maintenance scholarships that have come in for the last couple years. We're adding more and more every year. So definitely get involved there for the scholarships opportunity, and then just to, continue to meet other women in the industry.
A lot of badass ladies flying helicopters and doing cool helicopter things, that's for sure. Also working on helicopters. Talk about a really underrepresented part of the industry is working on them. So like Faith Ortega of How to Helicopter, she has a pretty big platform and showing other women that you can also work on helicopters. What a novel concept. So it's incredible. I think it's great. And I think you're right. I think we're looking at an industry right now that is short, right? We're short on maintainers. We're short on pilots. I made a LinkedIn post the other day about, a job that I got back in the day was like near impossible. And I even had to make a little white lie just to make sure I could get into that interview, because I just had to, I saw the door was cracked. I had to kick it open to get that job. And now that same job is like, they're begging people to come and work for them.
Yeah.
And, so to me, that speaks volumes, right? People are going to the airlines. People just aren't getting involved. The path to flying helicopters is expensive. It's unknown. And so, yeah, if we can open the door to more females, man, we're just adding more to the pool that can continue to support this industry and do really cool things. Well, Kimberly, thank you so much. This has been really fun. I'm glad that we got to talk about the psychology piece. That's something that's very interesting to me because, human factors is such a big part of it. At the end of the day, the meat servo, as I always call it up front, has a brain. And that brain is full of thoughts and ideas and stress and happiness and sadness. And, you have to mitigate that when you're flying because there's so much on the line. So I would love to continue that conversation. I know that you do some columns for MHM. So to our listeners, make sure that you're checking out all vertical platforms for future columns and past columns from Kimberly. You can also just go to theverticalmag.com and search her name, I'm sure, and pull up all the different columns that she's supported. To MHM Publishing, thank you so much for making this podcast possible. To our sponsors, thank you guys. Robinson Helicopters is a sponsor, and I know that you guys are rocking the Robinson aircraft. In fact, I saw the utility configured R66 at this year's Verticon, so shout out to RHC. You guys are doing some big things. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining the podcast, and I hope that we can continue this conversation in the future.
Thank you for having me.
Please stay tuned for a final word from our sponsors.
Verticon was epic. More than 600 companies, 15,000 attendees, and the cutting edge of vertical aviation technology. Next stop, Atlanta. Lottery 1 deadline is June 13th, and the show floor is filling fast. Secure your spot now at the world's largest vertical aviation show, Verticon, powered by VAI at verticon.org.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
This podcast is brought to you by HeliCASTS. Tired of listings that go nowhere? Exhausted by tire kickers who waste your time? Don't sell your helicopter alone. HeliCASTS handles the entire process from start to finish. So, if your helicopter is sat too long waiting for a buyer, contact the team at HeliCASTS today for your complimentary market valuation. Call 1-855-HeliCASTS, 1-855-735-5226, or email sales@helicopter.com. HeliCASTS. List it, sell it, done.